What's going on, everyone? We are back again today with another video, but a little bit different this time. A couple days ago, I posted a video on the state and future of Star Wars Unlimited, and a lot of you commented about what you found to be pretty exciting, and also some things that you were a little bit worried about, because this video really went into basically 2024 and the overall, I guess you could say, timeline a little bit, as well as some things that FFG have already stated are in our future. And I wanted to go over a few of the comments today and talk about them, because I felt like this was the biggest community interaction on a video that I've seen in a while, not just because of the comments, but also just how many people are liking certain comments. And I mean, just to start us off, the top comment here: I'm very scared of this game dying. I love it too much. And a lot of people are in that same boat, including myself, right? Including myself, where this is just a really fun game. It matches the IP that, well, at least I, and I'm sure many of you, really enjoy. Although it seems like at every single point, and this is really applicable to any game realistically, every single time you mention FFG and every single time you mentioned that the game is, well, doing reasonably well, that this follow-up reply happens. FFG, 3-year lifespan for a fact. Ultimately, they ruin everything. The game is not something to heavily invest in. Just enjoy it while it lasts. And he's not alone. They're not alone in this statement, and it's not necessarily an unreasonable statement. It's just that is what ends up happening anytime you really talk about the game succeeding or sticking around for any sort of time. And of course, as will a lot of other people, some are full of hope, some are in this stage, and some are just enjoying the game and not even necessarily caring about it. I do find that this game seems to kind of at least go in a little bit of a different direction than some people are saying with FFG, but I'm sure there's going to be many different things that people point to that are very similar with the previous unsuccessful games. But while that is something that we could dive into, it's really not necessarily that interesting to me, because we never know what FFG is actually going to decide to do, and whether or not they're going to kind of take the game in a direction that maybe most of us don't like. We will just have to wait and see. However, there were a few things that, well, a lot of people really had passionate feelings about, including the set rotation. This is the biggest one. These two comments both are kind of in agreement in that set rotation is really brutal, and they are not interested in it. This first one, I hope they don't do a set rotation, but maybe the top 5 leaders or X amount of cards played in tourneys that become restricted/banned. The following reply is they're going to do a set rotation. We just don't know how and when. It's going to happen. That's what they stated, at least. They may change their minds, but as of right now, we can expect that they will be doing a set rotation. And this type of, I guess you'd say, rotation where they only change out the best cards in a set isn't necessarily why they do a set rotation oftentimes. There's a few reasons why, a couple of them including just shaking up the meta entirely. And so if you were to ban, let's say, the top 5 leaders or some of the most played cards, that would shake up the meta a decent amount. But more so, shaking up the meta in a way that changes the focus of the cards in the pool. If you just ban the top cards, every single card that exists still exists. And that means that some sets that have some focus still exist. If you were to, let's say, rotate out set 1, you lose a lot of specific synergies that work with a lot of specific decks. And so what it does is it completely changes the overall strategy of a lot of different decks, because they don't have access to those strategies anymore. Another comment here: a set rotation of set 1 would kill this game stone dead. There are just too many critical cards in set 1 that are needed as the building blocks of the game. And, well, there's a lot of different conversation about this. But the first thing that a lot of people, well, are worried about with set 1 rotating out is that set 1 is such a critical part of the game right now. And it's really hard to think of Star Wars Limited without set 1, right? The Rebel aggro package, the Darth Vaders, the Luke Skywalkers. I mean, these are literally the cards that decks are built around. Like Sabine is purely built around the Rebel aggro strategy. Imagine playing Sabine green without the Rebel aggro synergy. I mean, you just can't. Imagine trying to win a game of villainy, command, vigilance, control without Avengers and Darth Vaders. Imagine trying to win a game of Anakin blue or New Han blue without Luke's. Like, these are decks that are kind of built around these specific cards. And so, yes, right now, that's almost impossible to imagine. The whole idea of this is that we're not going to see a rotation until there are a lot more sets in the game. Set 1 was a little bit interesting in that Set 1 for Star Wars Unlimited is in a time period where TCGs have existed for a long time. And so the expectation is that Set 1 would stand alone and be a very, very synergistic set that forces you to kind of, well, have these options available to you across the board. If you look at Set 2 and Set 3, there's not as much versatility. There's not as much synergy with the cards in the set. And that's because Set 1 was a baseline for the entire game. Set 1 almost needed to be its entire card pool to be something that was exceptional enough to actually entice people to play the game. And it did. But that also means that Set 2 and Set 3 look very weak comparatively. And in some nature, they are, in terms of power level, at least in terms of the cards that we're seeing in competitive decks. But we're going to see a bunch more sets. And they may not be as powerful as Set 1. We may never see a card as powerful as Avenger to finishing out control games. We never see mid-range Darth Vader be as good as it is now, or a card as good as the mid-range Darth Vader. We may never see a Luke in a future set that acts as this removal catch-up game for those soft control heroism decks. But we will see other things. And that does change the overall strategy. And so I don't expect to see a rotation anytime realistically soon, maybe after the next 2-3 sets perhaps, and it will shake up the meta. It will go ahead and give us kind of this, well, at least for me, exciting time period where we have an infinite amount of choices, similar to Boba banning, but extremely exasperated. When Boba was banned and Set 3 released, the whole game changed. Boba's banned. We don't have all these different Boba variations. And we have a brand new set in which we saw a bunch new decks created. Django Red, Cad Bane Red. Some of these kind of existed like Cad Bane Red before, but really got pushed a lot better than they were. Anakin Blue, Yoda Yellow, like all these various ones have just popped up. And that's the same thing that rotation does for a set. It is, at least in my opinion, one of the most exciting times for a TCG. At least for Magic, it is literally one of the few times where I'll sit down and actually play more formats than just Draft. Because although I do enjoy playing some of these other formats, Draft is the one I play the most, and, well, that's kind of like infinitely rotating because of all the new cards. However, there are things that are concerning about rotation, and this is applicable to any rotating game. Rotations can be too fast, where the cards you invest in no longer are legal in your format, and you can no longer play them, which makes basically the entire amount of money you spent not necessarily worthwhile, is a huge one. Is an absolutely huge one. Not only that, but also maybe someone particularly likes a certain set is going to rotate out and they're going to have less fun playing the other sets, and a slew of other concerns. And that's where I hope when they do this rotation, which they will, as far as we know, that they create a brand new format in which all the cards that we have from Set 1 from the rotation, maybe they'll rotate out Set 1, 2, and 3, who knows, will be legal in a separate format. That's something that maybe some people could play casually. Maybe they'll start having planetary qualifiers and galactic championships for multiple different formats to push the competitive game. All of this is something that would need considering. And again, if you look at Set 1 right now and they were rotate out, I would say that that's a massive mistake, and it would kill the game stone dead. But add 3-4 more sets in the mix, and we may have a very different conversation. We may have a Set 4 that is extremely powerful. We may have a Set 5 that completely shakes up the meta and is the brand new cards that are needing to potentially even be banned because they're so strong. Or we may see pretty weak sets and just have different mechanics that are individually strong that amplify previous decks, and eventually when they rotate out, completely change the meta as well. Who knows what will happen, but this is something that is worthwhile to talk about. Not to say that these are not valid concerns, because they absolutely are. Are we going to have enough cards? Are we going to have that critical mass of cards to where rotating out a set would actually make the game at least a little bit different, a little bit more interesting? And is it worthwhile creating a new format? Or should we just be continuing on with our standard gameplay in Premiere? Who knows? It depends on when they're going to initiate this rotation. Of course, this is something that people may never agree with, because again, some people don't agree with that in other TCGs, and maybe they just hold their collection to the point where I only play in this one format, and if it rotates out, well, it really hinders the kind of excitement of collecting some of these cards. Another one that I wanted to mention was maybe they could reprint old cards in new sets, but never again reprint foil space variations of the original cards that might keep some value from the old boxes. It's a kind of an interesting kind of addition because of the Carbonite boosters from 2025 in set 4. Something that they oftentimes will do in other TCGs is reprint old cards to maybe bring down the price of standard variations, but then the kind of exclusive variations, hyperspace foil, prestige edition, whatever it is, are extremely valuable because they aren't reprinted in those sets. It's a little bit interesting because this kind of goes into reprint value and kind of teeters into the collectability aspect of the game and the playability in terms of the price point of the game, which are all extremely important things to monitor. And I think this is actually a great idea. I think it's actually a really interesting topic because they're already reprinting cards. They've already reprinted some commons, some uncommons, I think, or some commons from previous sets like Open Fire, Vanquish, the Daring Ray, things like that, for example, in later sets. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more. And I think the biggest one that I saw that happened, or that a lot of you commented on, was online variants. Online variants. Besides, quitting your other TCGs for Star Wars Unlimited, like Flesh and Blood or Lorcana, for example, is that we need an online variation. For example, Carabas is the only reason the game is still around, and the only reason I got into the game. They need an official online client or a game will die, especially when they desist Carabas. Expecting people to only play in person in 2025 is crazy. There was another one over here that, where was it? There was a whole other comment here, a couple comments that for some reason, I cannot find now. But basically talking about they had a digital there. Here we go. Would love a digital version with ranks like Hearthstone, but I know that's just streaming. I think this is a really, really important point because I've spoke about this in previous videos about Carabas. If you didn't know, for those of you that might be new to the channel, or maybe you haven't watched those videos, I am basically one of the only creators that actually posts online Star Wars Unlimited, unless you're watching like Tabletop Simulator. I don't know the rules behind Tabletop Simulator, to be honest, when it comes to FFG, because if you want to be a sanctioned FFG content creator, you need to be able to give up Carabas. They don't want you playing these third-party clients on your videos. Well, I want to play Carabas, and it's the easiest way to play Star Wars Unlimited. It's also one of the easiest digestible variations because it's easier to see for recordings, it's easier to get games, and it's easier to see a wide slew of not only players, but also random decks. And I know some people will be like, oh, well, Carabas in terms of average skill level is way lower, and, this, that, and the other thing. And there are obviously things that you need to concern yourself with Carabas. There's bugs, of course. But at the end of the day, most people just want to play the game. And Carabas is free. It's online, very easy to set up, very easy to get in the game, and you can play whatever cards you want, for the most part, with some bugs. And that all is very important to keeping the interest of a game alive, especially in 2025. This is something that is very dear to me. If there was not a Carabas, it would be so much harder for me to get in games, mess around with decks, try a bunch of stuff. Not because I couldn't get access to other people and do Tabletop Simulator, which I did for a while, as you all saw with the beginning of set 3, but more so because it's so convenient that when I don't have the hour and a half, 2 hours to sit down and set up Tabletop Simulator, I can just jump on, play a 15-minute game here, play a 15-minute game there. That is something that is extremely valuable. And again, other games like Magic the Gathering or even Lorcana have the same thing. Lorcana got hit with a massive shutdown of their biggest Lorcana online platforms, and that really hindered the growth and the excitement of the game because they did not have access to the same client as they were using for a long time. I couldn't imagine really getting into Magic without Magic Online or Magic Arena. To be honest, I play a good amount of Magic, the biggest trading, one of the biggest names in trading card game, but I don't really play almost ever in paper. The only times I will is when a draft shows up or something like that, or a new set releases and I come in for the few events that we have, especially not going to competitive events besides like a few. Like last year I had gone to like a regional qualifier, and then a couple of things in like Denver, which was pretty fun, which I played in. But all of those require trips. They all require like setting up specific times. They require in some cases qualifying, which I did for Magic in the past. All of these things require additional time, energy, money, and all this stuff, and it just doesn't happen, and the stars don't line up all that often for many people to be able to do that. And so being able to get an online platform, if I could hope for one big thing for Star Wars Unlimited, is to get a client like Magic the Gathering Arena. Something that gives you access, has a ranking system, has the ability to get the cards free, and monetizes the game. Because I think that's something really important, is being able to monetize the game as the company is important to keep the game alive. I am not someone that's sanctioned by FFG. I am not someone that's going to cater to FFG for my videos. But at the end of the day, I'm not someone that's also going to say, oh, we want everything for free and we want to be able to do this, this, and this, without understanding that if we are not able to support Star Wars Unlimited in terms of its development and they're not able to make enough money, the game probably will slow down. And so I really want to see that balance be made. There is an absolute balance, and there's certainly many companies that lean towards the unbalanced company profitability favor, but somewhere in the middle where we can get an online client so we can play. All of these things are really important for 2025. Set rotation, a new online client if we can get it, the potential introduction of a new format with rotation. I know some people mentioned some things about Twin Suns. It's something that's kind of similar to Magic the Gathering's casual format in Commander. Some work towards the collectability of the game, either with reprints and saving these prestige editions and hyperspace foil variants as Dream opens in earlier boxes. All of these are really, really important factors for the future of Star Wars Unlimited. And I figured it was worth just kind of talking about it and sharing some of my thoughts on it for a video today. But I'm really curious about what you all have to say. I think there isn't really any one that's wrong here. No one's wrong. It's just a matter of perspective, right? One of the big things is a lot of people have very, very big, not grudges, I want to say, but very big amount of distrust for FFG, and they think the game is going to be dying. On the other hand, there's a lot of people that have a lot of hope, and well, they just want to play the game and hope that the game isn't going to die. We're not really at that stage yet. Talk to us in like 2 years when we have hit that about 3-year mark for a trading card game, because oftentimes that 3-year mark is usually where we get to see the success of a trading card game and whether or not it is going to potentially not die necessarily, but maybe there's a little bit of a downtick, and that might be a little bit more concerning. As for right now, we are very early into the game. We have a lot of things to work on. The competitive field isn't even launched yet, really. We're in season 0, so we're just getting our feet wet a little bit, and we didn't even have tournaments for set 1. It was only with the late set 2 that we were getting to see these planetary qualifiers, and so there's a lot of things to be hopeful for, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, feelings, and suggestions potentially for 2025. or maybe there's something that's a little bit more important than you think, or maybe there's something I didn't mention in the video. I know there is, because, well, I have a lot more to say, and, well, I know some of you could sit here and listen to me speak for hours, but that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.